Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing. My name is Trevor Blondeel. Spending 25 years in manufacturing, I discovered the real impact we have on turnover, communication, and the ability to manage change is how we show up. That's the essence of emotional intelligence. In each episode, we bring a guest or message to expand your skills, engage your people, and grow your organization. So let's jump in. On this podcast, we've talked about engagement, and lately we've been talking more about retention and recruitment, solving some of those problems in manufacturing. And man, 5 years onto this podcast now, and it's been 8 years since I've worked in manufacturing directly. And there's a lot of consistency with the problems that we see. But today we've got some excitement and a special guest on how do we get in front of that? I've really had to do a lot of work to become an executive coach, and it just takes a lot of practice, a good community. And when I got certified in coaching, the first book that I really read after I got certified in coaching in 2017 was The Coaching Habit. Say less, ask more, and change the way you lead forever. And that's going to happen to you today by the end of this episode, because I got my friend and author, Michael Bungay Stanier, with me today. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, thank you so much. I love that you're holding the book up. And I love that you've done the training as a coach, and you use that book to help you with that. But, secretly between you and me, Trevor, I wrote the book for people who aren't coaches, for people who, lead a team or lead an organization, who are trying to go, look, I need to engage my people. I need to bring out their best. I need to be less exhausted. I need to be less the bottleneck to my own work. How do I do that? And, being more coach-like was always one of those underutilized leadership skills. So, the book has a fan base in the world of coaching for sure. But, I'm really trying to get it in the hands of other people who go, I don't need to be a coach, but if I could be more coach-like, if I could stay curious just a little bit longer, that's going to help me deliver both on my strategy and improve my culture. And if you can do that, then you're going to have a thriving organization.
You've been so impactful to manufacturing already, Michael. You don't even realize it, because I've given your books out to so many people.
Thank you.
Your TEDx talk has over 2 million views. In some of my sessions, I have people watch it before.
Oh, that's great.
Because that really leans into another book, The Advice Trap.
Yeah.
And that one, I like it as much or more than The Coaching Habit, just because of the way you hold that in. And as manufacturing leaders, we just love to tell. We love to give advice and give direction. And I did it for so many years, Michael. And it was only kind of in the last few years realizing that I was taking away something from my team. And I'm like, I need to bring Michael on to help talk to other manufacturing leaders about what I learned.
Well, let me ask you, because you're right. One of the things I champion is slowing down the rush to giving advice. Not to never give advice, because I don't think that makes any sense. But what I'm trying to break is people's default response to be, my job here is to have the answer, to provide the solution, to save the person, to stay in control. How do I move that to curiosity? And you're right, the TEDx talk's been seen close to 2 million people. My favorite comment, by the way, on that is somebody wrote, I tried to watch this, but his trousers were too tight. So I was like, I don't know what to do with that. But anyway, if you're listening, you can go, I don't know, do I want to see how tight his trousers are or not? But let me ask you, Trevor, you've made this transformation. What was hard for you about having advice as your default response?
It's still hard today. I was on a coaching call today where I'm coaching a leader in manufacturing, and I talked about you. And I said, I'm going to have a conversation with Michael today, and I just reread some of his material. Yes, to get prepared for this and make this a great experience, but it just helps me. And it actually helped me be a better coach this morning, because, just some small nuances, that I've learned is that I wanted to say something about, it was a conversation of navigating between an employee and his boss.
Yeah.
And I just so bad just want to say, well, what about talking to your boss? And it's like, and your voice was ringing in my head saying, slow down, pop, and what else?
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. For people listening, one of the most fundamental shifts you can do in your own self-identity, in whatever role you play in your manufacturing organization, if you can become the person who figures out what the real problem is, as opposed to the person who always has the fast answer. Fast answers are increasingly a commodity, like ChatGPT. has most of the fast answers that you can come up with and more articulate than you. It's very annoying. But it's a rare thing to have somebody who goes, look, I'm pretty good at actually slowing down us getting busy for no apparent reason and actually getting curious about what's the hard thing, what's the real thing, what's the most important thing. And if you can be that person, then you become the person who's strategic. You become the person who helps focus people's attention on the stuff that matters. And that is a truly valuable skill.
I don't know what the answer is, but it seems like it's a contagious on this whole, we need to speak our own ideas.
Right.
And
Well, it's habit. I mean, to be fair, Trevor, we've all been rewarded our entire lives for being the person with the answer. So, this is easy to say and harder to do because, since you were 4 and sticking up your hand when the preschool teacher said, hey, who knows how to, you're like, I do. Well, there's been, in subtler ways, we've been encouraged to continue to be the person to stick up our hand and go, I know. Let me tell you. Let me prove how I'm being helpful. Let me prove how I'm adding value. And it just turns out that at a certain point, and certainly when you're working with other adults, being the person who's always first with the answer becomes a less valuable trait.
Yeah. That makes sense, from the young point. And then even as parents, like I tell you, with my son Dyson, I was always worried or concerned about his dirty dishes when he started living on his own.
Yeah.
And I talk about this in my keynotes as my opening story because I had to get more curious, Michael.
Right.
And when we start being more curious and we let others shine by asking more questions, it's our friends, it helps our family, it makes a better community. And what I found out was my son was addicted to alcohol. And he's sober now, for the listeners that maybe haven't heard that.
Oh, great.
It's a long journey, but if I don't get more curious, I don't know if he's sober.
I love hearing that story. I myself am happily child-free, so I don't have any specific expertise on parenting, but I do hear stories regularly from parents going, I'm having a better conversation with my teen than I've had before because teenagers, they're designed to irritate the hell out of you. And they're designed to trigger the let me tell you what to do thing. And the ability to hold space and ask a question and listen to an answer. If you can do that with people in your family and particularly your kids, then you will be masterful in other contexts because it's the hardest context to try and do that in.
Yeah, you've had an impact on me personally, Michael, like going through that. And then
thank you.
I know you have us in manufacturing as well. And I'm not talking about making parts. I'm talking about leaders underneath a lot of stress that are having challenges with their family of what that looks like. And then just realizing that, how we show up impacts on how people feel, right? And if we want people to really engage with us, we got to be more curious. And just, like I said, the question I asked this morning to the individual was, if you were sitting in your heels of curiosity, what's a question you would ask your boss?
Oh, that's nice.
And that is kind of like, the challenge is like, I guess, like you said, it's habit, but it's like, how do we stay there more often?
And for me, it almost starts. You can walk through any number of doors. There are some people who, they read the coaching habit or they read the summary of the coaching habit or they just Google the questions from the coaching habit and they're like, okay, there are 7 good questions. And some people are able just to pick up the 7 questions and start asking them and integrating them in the way they work. And that's brilliant. For others, it's a trickier change process than that. And for them, often it starts being helpful to notice how quickly and how often you interrupt other people, how quickly and how urgently your advice monster shows up in your head and says, tell them the stuff, tell them the thing. And noticing those triggers and practicing not acting on them becomes the way into being more coach-like.
So when you've seen leaders that are kind of ingrained and not all of a sudden, but over time, they let their team start to shine.
Right.
What have you seen, Michael? If somebody's driving to the plant right now, they're running a plant and they're like, I hear you, but I'm busy and I just got to let people know what they need to do, Michael. What can you tell that listener right now?
Well, often coaching is framed in this sense of this will be good for the other people. This will be good for your company. This will be good for the people that you're coaching. And there's not a lot of time spent on, let me tell you how this is going to make your life better. And what most managers and leaders are facing are some combination of 3 vicious circles. There's a combination of an over-dependent team. The more you give them the answers, the more they come to you the answers. The more they come to you for the answers, the more you give them the answers. And before you know it, even though you've hired competent people, you've set up this dependency on you, which is exhausting and frustrating for you. And it's exhausting and frustrating for them as well, because now you're becoming the bottleneck to them actually getting stuff done. And you effectively infantilizing people because they're like, oh, you can't make any decisions. I have to make all the decisions. The second vicious circle is just a sense of overwhelm. Most people can kind of connect to this. The more that's up on your plate, the more you lose focus on what matters most. The more you lose focus on what matters most, the more ends up on your plate. And you just spend the whole time going, I'm in a constant low level or high level state of anxiety and twitchiness because I'm never going to get on top of all the things that I need to do. And then the third kind of cycle of misery, vicious circle, is kind of losing losing connection to the purpose of the work, the why of the work. The less impact you have, the more you kind of give up. The more you give up, the less impact you have. And most managers and leaders can relate to one, two, or all three of those. And one of the things about being more coach-like, and the way you can hear I'm not saying be a coach, but just be more coach-like. It's a leadership skill. It's not an identity. Is to stay curious a little bit longer, not never give advice, just wait a little bit longer, like 90 seconds, 2 minutes before you leap in with your ideas. One of the things that will happen if you start that practice and start building that muscle, you will get out of those three vicious circles: an overdependent team, a sense of overwhelm, and a sense of disconnect. So it moves you away from pain, but it also moves you towards reward or joy or prizes, whatever you want to call it. An opportunity to do more of the work that actually you want to do, more of the work that has meaning to you and makes a difference to your organization. So if you're a bit miserable because of the way managing and leading a team is at the moment, being more coach-like can work. If you're a bit hungry to have more impact and find more meaning in the work that you do, being more coach-like can work. And only if one of those or both of those things are true for you, will you have the motivation to go, okay, so I need to actually think about how I shift my behavior. And that's why the coaching habit is called the coaching habit, which is the first chapter is, here's what a habit is. Because you need to understand the mechanics of habits and behavior change so that you can actually do something about the way you behave right now.
I like that feeling of like just giving yourself a little bit of grace, just to say, hey, I am hardwired right now like this, and it is a habit, and this is good now because I know I can change it.
Right.
I know it's a skill. It's not something that's born. We can all
it's a skill. We can all get a little bit better at this. I mean, some people are going to be, naturally brilliant at this, and that doesn't have to be you. I can say, and this is kind of an insight from that first chapter, which I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure you can just download the first chapter at thecoachinghabit.com. So if you're curious and you're like, let me check this out, thecoachinghabit.com could be a resource for you. But the key insight about building a habit is, if you're listening to this conversation with Trevor and me and going, oh, this is making so much sense, I'm definitely going to try and be more coach-like when I get into work. That kind of general, slightly vague commitment, oh yeah, hallelujah, praise Lord, I see the light. Unfortunately, that's not going to work. That's not going to be enough to change your behavior. You've got to then go, all right, so, who in my team am I going to pick? And what question could I practice? And what's the moment where I see them regularly that I want to be practicing my coach-like? It's like, get really specific about where and when and with whom you'd like to be more coach-like. It's easier for Trevor because he's an executive coach. So he literally has a session with people called coaching. So he's like, okay, I'm going to be coach-like in this session. If you're managing a team, you have to be a little bit more deliberate. You have to name and find your moments.
I like naming it. Just naming it, saying, so your team doesn't think like, what's going on? Oh, I just listened to a podcast with Michael and Trevor.
Yeah, exactly.
If you can name it and saying, hey, I feel the pressure. I want to tell you what's going on, and I want to make a change, right?
Yeah.
I want to be able to step back a little bit more. And I think if you can just share that with your team and just kind of say, right, I'm working towards this.
Yeah, they can be allies for your behavior change. So bring them on board. Don't try and do a weird Wizard of Oz thing. I'm going to do mysterious stuff behind the curtain. Everybody will be going, what the hell's just happening here? And can we wait him out or her out for 2 weeks until they go back to their old way of behaving? Trevor, let me ask you a question. You know the 7 questions from the coaching habit. Was there one question that you started using first? I mean, where did you begin?
I think like the what else is probably, I wish I could say it's, these things are complicated and and they're not. I think it's the fact of not the first response you get is just the beginning.
Yeah, so hear this, people, because this is such a key insight, which is a fundamental shift in how you see the world, is starting to realize that their first answer is not their only answer, and it's rarely their best answer.
Yeah.
But, we get seduced. We're so excited that we asked a question and we got an answer. We're like, okay, that's the answer. Let's crack on with it. And, that's just their first guess.
Mm-hmm.
And the power of the question, and what else, AWE, so literally an awesome question, is that it extends the place of curiosity. It allows you to be curious longer. It allows them to explore the question further. And, pennies to pounds, their second and their third question answers are often better and more useful than their first answer.
Whether it's what's beneath your dishes or they're coming to you with an issue.
Yeah.
But if you just sit in your heels a little bit longer and say, okay, so what else is going on? Like, what's driving that?
Yeah.
And just stay in that curiosity, you will be able to ask the last question of what's the real challenge here? Because that's what we miss. And if it's like we do great, Michael, root cause analysis, lean manufacturing, engineering, we are awesome.
Right.
And then when it comes to the people stuff, it's like, why don't we do a 5 why really is just saying what else 5 times.
It is. And I love that you're picking that up and making that connection, because I'm sure lots of listeners here know that kind of ladder of inference, the 5 whys to help you get to the root cause of something. And that works really well in the right context. It works much less well in the context of a conversation with somebody else. Because if you're in conversation with somebody and they're like, well, here's the thing, and you go, well, why? And then they go, well, this, and you go, well, why? And then you go, well, this, and you go, well, why? It's hard not to get a bit defensive about that. It's hard not to kind of feel like I'm being attacked here. Like I feel like an idiot because the guy keeps going, but why? And there's something gentler about, and what else? So what's the real challenge here for you? And what else? And what else? And what else? Okay, so what's the real challenge here for you? Okay, if that's the real challenge here for you, what do you want? And what else do you want? And what else do you want? So what do you really want? Okay, if that's what you really want, what's the real challenge here for you?
Yes.
And what the book preaches is laziness as a core coaching principle, which is like, stop working so hard. Stop working so hard to solve other people's problems for them. Also, stop working so hard to come up with amazing questions every time. Like the 7 questions in the Coaching Habit book get you a long way down the path of being more coach-like with a lot of people a lot of the time. There are, of course, other great questions out there, but these 7 questions are pretty good as a foundation question kit.
And you got to trust yourself, right? Like, I think if you can sit in those heels of curiosity, know some fundamentals, but like even with this conversation with you today, like I don't have a script here.
Yeah.
I know you, I know the listeners, and I trust myself just to be curious with you, serve the audience. Like, how do we let our teams shine through this?
Well, I'm going to jump in on that, Trevor, if I can, because
Yeah.
trusting yourself is easy to say and it's hard to do, particularly when you're trying out a new skill. And it's worth just acknowledging that asking a question does not feel as good as giving advice. Asking a question can be much more effective than giving advice. But even when you're providing not very good advice to solve the thing that isn't actually the real issue, you still feel pretty good about it because you're like, look at me, I'm smart, I'm delivering value, I'm proving my expertise, I'm not over the hill yet, I still got it. Whereas when you ask a question, you're like, is it a good question? Will they answer it? Will I understand their answer? Not quite sure how it's going to play out. So giving advice creates certainty, and our little amygdala, our lizard brain, loves certainty. Asking a question, much more ambiguous. Our lizard brain doesn't like ambiguity. And as a learned behavior, it's often much more effective than other styles of leadership.
That's a great insight because, I didn't walk into this podcast just trusting myself. I had to do a lot of work before it. Right. And that's such a good shift on that, because it isn't just, you can't just go in there and trust yourself. It takes a lot, the habit, all that stuff that you write about, and how do we create those habits? How do we pick, like we earlier, they pick one thing. I got to do a call back to the 5 why.
Okay.
And I was with the client this morning. He's like, well, yeah, so maybe I'll just kind of go to my boss and I'll just ask him, hey, so why don't you like this idea? I said, hold on a minute. Talk to us, Michael, about the question when you start with a why. When is it good to use it and when is it not?
Well, honestly, in a regular coaching conversation, I almost never use it. I'm almost always trying to start my questions with what. Occasionally with how, but when you're asking a how question, you're asking a how will we get it done question. It's like, what's the process for moving forward from here? And it only makes sense to ask that once you're really clear on what the challenge is, and possibly what the best solution to the challenge is. So how has its place? But I think, generally speaking, in regular conversation, as soon as you start asking why, you just make people defensive, or you're asking it because you're like, I need more information so I can come up with the best answer to give you the best answer. And when you realize that your job mostly isn't to come up with the best answer, it's to help them come up with the best answer, then the why feels less important.
Mm-hmm.
Right at the start of the show, you framed this conversation in part being around engagement. I think why is often a disengaging question.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That creates disconnect.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if we practice with each other, we can feel it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, why did you do this? Sounds an awful lot. Why the hell did you do this?
Michael's upset with me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then the other aspect you talk about too is like, what's your body saying, right? Our body says so much as well in these conversations.
Well, body language is interesting because, there's a bunch of writing about it. And part of the challenge with body language is it can be interpreted in different ways. So I think the most interesting framework on what your body's saying is not what your body's saying to them, but what your body's saying to you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're buying into this conversation between Trevor and me so far, and you're like, yeah, okay, this makes sense, but how do I get more curious and stay more curious more often? One of the exercises you could do if you wanted to was to understand what the difference is physically for you when you're in advice giving mode and when you're in curious asking questions mode. Because it's certainly different for me. When I'm in advice giving mode, I kind of get up on my toes and I lean forward a bit. I'm a bit tenser and I'm not listening as well. When I'm more curious, I'm sitting back a bit. My hands are a bit more relaxed. My butt cheeks are a bit more relaxed. I'm just physically a bit different.
Yes.
And if I'm not sure as to how I want to be, I'm like, well, you should probably be curious because that tends to work best for you. And so I try and adjust my physical presence because your body leads your brain. So adjust your body to be the way you want to be in the world and your brain will follow.
It's just different techniques. And I can just, as you're talking and I'm trying to remain present and not thinking about myself, but you can't help it, right? Because you're taking me like, oh yeah, like, and I'm sure the listeners are driving can feel themselves like, my shoulders are a little bit lower. I'm a little more relaxed when I'm driving because I'm just going to let the team shine and I'm going to ask them the questions and I can take some pressure off myself. And I can let them figure it out.
You can, and you have a safety net. This is a good point to because I know we're close to our time to finish on, which is like not saying never. It's like not saying don't give advice. I'm saying, can you just stay curious a little bit longer? Mm-hmm. Can you rush to action and advice giving a little bit more slowly? Which means you can give advice. And it might be a really good place for you to give advice. But what becomes marvelous about staying curious is often you go, turns out I didn't need to give them my advice anyway because they figured it out. And they've come up with an answer that's pretty much as good as mine, maybe even better.
I love it. Yeah, I really feel that manufacturing can be an entirely different industry. It's so untapped in this skill. I know because I was in it for 25 years. Yeah. And I wish I had read The Coaching Habit when I was running a plant. And I'm grateful that, we get to share that, with our listeners. Years ago, I do a book report every month on the website. Years ago, I did The Coaching Habit. It was, fundamentals. And then the advice trap now. And then how to work with almost anyone. I've been on some of your webinars.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And starting to share that now. And I tell you, folks, like I've got some resources on the Manufacturing Greatness website, and it's like just a sliver of what Michael offers. Like there's no excuses. He's got the Box of Crayons company that talks about curiosity. And how else for the listeners to follow and enjoy your teachings, Mike?
So boxofcrayons.com is a training company that works with bigger companies to help bring some of these coaching skills in. So if you've got a big, juicy training budget, call up Box of Crayons because they'd love to talk to you. I own that company, but I'm not involved in the day-to-day of that. And then my own personal website is mbs.work. So no .com, just mbs.works. And that's much more around helping individuals learn and grow, be more coach-like, also kind of figure out what they want to do with their lives. And you can find a ton of resources there as well.
Yeah, I love it. The impact that you've had on me personally on my, I'm in a coaching mastermind for the last 4 years, and we talk about you regularly.
Oh, thank you.
It's like, I just want you to leave here feeling, maybe I made an impact in some areas I just didn't know. And
I do feel that.
Right?
I feel that. Thank you, Trevor. I appreciate the acknowledgement.
It's so true, man. And we need you, and we need your voice, and we need all our voices. And I think if everybody can just stay a little bit more curious. So the last thing I say when people are walking into the plant and they say, hey, I just listened to Michael and Trevor, what's the main one message you want them to leave with here today?
I don't mind really. Like if they found a message in amongst that, then we win. The last question of the coaching habit is what was most useful or most valuable for you? And the very point of that is not for me to tell you what was most useful or value, but for you to extract what was most valuable and useful for you. So if you are listening to this, Trevor and I covered a lot of ground in half an hour. What was, of everything we talked about, what was most useful or most valuable? And whatever that is, that's perfect.
There's your last tip for the day. When you meet with your employees or your teammates, end with that question. When you run a meeting, end with that question. I've learned that from you, Michael, and I do it every time. And it's
I love it.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, my friend, from Australia to living in Toronto, just a couple hours from where I grew up, and just appreciate you in the community. And thanks so much for coming on. You're awesome.
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me.
Hey, folks, appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone. Haven't subscribed yet? Do it now. Remember, if you want results, the key is increasing your awareness of how you show up.